in hearing people who have lost everything, whose island is devastated, singing about the goodness of God. They were worshiping God and thanking Him for what they still had left.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, where we take you to the front lines and behind the scenes of our work around the world. I'm your host, Christy Graham, and last week, Hurricane Beryl tore through the Caribbean, devastating multiple islands. And this was a powerful storm that quickly intensified, and Samaritan's Purse sent in a team immediately. They took with them supplies and a hospital, but more importantly, the message of the gospel. And today I want to share with you how you can be praying for the people that are still reeling after the hurricane, as well as our teams on the ground. One of our team members, Kaitlyn, just got back, and I was able to sit down with her and see what she saw during the first wave of this response.
I flew in with our team of disaster response specialists on Tuesday, which was less than 24 hours after the storm hit Grenada. So we got on the ground there on the main island of Grenada and then ferried out and took a barge out to Carriacou, which is a more remote island that's a part of the country of Grenada. So we've been there for the past week, serving families who have just been absolutely devastated by Hurricane Beryl, and we're bringing relief and bringing that urgently needed supplies to them.
And I know Hurricane Beryl, came through the Caribbean, devastated multiple islands. And so everybody has different needs. But yeah, tell us, what else beyond are they needing?
Yeah, so we set up an emergency field hospital there. Their main hospital, the roof blew off in the storm. So they had actually shifted their hospital care to a small clinic on the island. But they had no inpatient capacity. Their lab on the island was destroyed. So now we're able to fill in that gap and also support the healthcare providers who are there, because really no one was left untouched by the storm. Like 98% of the structures were damaged or destroyed. So even the doctors and nurses who were coming in to work at the hospital that was meeting in the smaller clinic, they had lost their homes. They were struggling to provide basic needs for their own families, for themselves. So it's the staff support filling the gap. It's the hospital itself. And then in addition to that, we're distributing emergency shelter material. We have a clean water filtration system that's taking ocean water and purifying it into drinking water. And then we're also distributing solar lights. We're basing our operations we're supporting operations out of the main island of Grenada, but the majority of our team is in Carriacou. And then from there, we're supporting smaller islands like Petit Martinique. We actually used our helicopter to sling load a water bladder over to Petit Martinique, and we're producing the water in Carriacou, putting it in other water bladders, sling loading it to the island, emptying it into a larger bladder. So it was an impressive operation to watch.
I cannot believe that. 98% of structures damaged. So every single person you're meeting is impacted. And even as we were talking before we started, you were saying you've been all over the world and you've been to hard places, but this was a very hard living conditions for our team, which means it was hard living conditions for the people that we're trying to go to help. So yeah, tell me, I guess, the state of the people. What were you seeing as you talked with people that you were ministering to?
Yeah, absolutely. The living conditions are extremely challenging. A lot of their homes are stick-built, which were completely flattened. Some of them are stick-built on top of concrete platforms. So many families are living underneath the concrete platform, which is sort of on stilts, just to have shelter. Or they're living with neighbors. And now, because of the tarp that Samaritan's Purse has gotten out, many of them are able to have makeshift shelters or partially have a dry place in their home to sleep from putting tarp on the roof if a piece of it's still standing. So it's a very, very challenging spot for them to be in, and that's why we're there.
And I know we often try to get into the fire as quickly as possible because that's when the needs are the greatest. And so you said within 24 hours, our teams were responding. Tell me, I know every response is different, but a lot of times it's through our church partners that are already there. So I guess how How were we able to get in so quickly? What was it like working with the church partners?
Samaritan's Purse was the first relief organization to arrive in Grenada. And a lot of the families told us that. We saw your plane coming in. You're the first ones here. We know relief is coming. So they were so just encouraged to see. Even one of them asked me, how did you get here so quickly? And we were able to explain that it's through that network of churches that we were able to load the cargo plane, land in Grenada, and then load all of our supplies onto a barge to take it over to Carriacou. And then once we got there, partnering with a small church in Carriacou to be able to live there, base there, and run our operations. The church was helping us cut tarp. They were helping us with the distribution to make sure we reached the most vulnerable people first. And it was really amazing to see how much people look to the local church. We partnered with a pastor. Pastor Happy was his name. And people would say, oh, you're with Pastor Happy's church. And he knew just about everyone on the island. It's a very small island, and it's very neighborly. Everyone kind of knows everyone. So they would recognize, oh, this is Pastor Happy's church who's out here giving us supplies. So just bringing hope, not through Samaritan's Purse, but through partnering with the local church who's going to be there after we're gone.
And I love how you said that, because they knew of him, they knew of the church before, but maybe people that weren't involved or hadn't gone to it now have been ministered. And I know we bring up Hagar often on the podcast. She was not an Israelite, but God spoke to her, and I think when you are desperate, she was desperate. She had fled in the wilderness, and she named God the God who sees, because she was so thirsty, so deprived, so hungry. And so tell me, I guess, what it's like when you have nothing. Because your team, even for a couple days, you were deprived. You had cold water, you had to bathe with a bucket. I mean, things were harsh. So can you while it's fresh, tell me what it's like when you truly have no hope. And as you said, we were the first plane in. So I can't imagine the relief of people feeling forgotten, feeling hopeless, feeling alone, to have relief come in like Hagar. She saw God in a way that many of us never will. What is it like to truly have nothing and then have hope come?
I think it's hard for me to even answer that because we know we're coming home. We know that at the end of our deployment, we've got a plane ticket, and we're coming back here to comfort. So I think every time that I would feel like, oh, I just really need a shower, or, oh, it's so hot, if only we had a fan to move, if the breeze would just start, and you're just so hot and tired. But then trying to remember this feeling won't last forever. So I don't even know that I could put myself in their shoes of knowing there is no end in sight. I mean, it's going to get better. We're going to keep providing relief, but they don't have a end date to what they're experiencing.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're right. It will get better every day. But this is going to be a long haul. I mean, for homes that are destroyed, and I mean, that will take time. So speak to the local church. And this is why we partner with the local church, because as you said, Samaritan's Purse, we will stay as long as the job needs to be done. But the church remains. I mean, they are going to be there for the long haul. And that's why we partner with them, because when we leave, they are the ones that will disciple and work with. So what did you see in them? And I guess, how did they encourage your team? Yeah, knowing they aren't leaving. They are here for the long haul.
Yeah, the first morning that we woke up in Carriacou, we were up about 5 a.m. and then about 6, the church partner and the pastor there and some volunteers who were living there said, okay, let's gather for worship. Let's have a short devotional time before we start these distributions and start getting tarp out and solar lights out, which was our first step that we did when I was there. And it was just this beautiful time of worship because their team started singing the song, Goodness of God. And it says, all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you've been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing about the goodness of God. And they're singing the song in the middle of absolute devastation. And it was a of course, an open church and tile floors, so it's getting louder and louder as people are singing about the goodness of God. And Pastor Happy, who was there, starts seeing people kind of walking by on the street who are looking in, what's happening there. And he starts inviting them in. You can come in, you can worship with us. Oh, come on in, you can worship with us. So we just have this beautiful time of worship, and it just moved the majority of our team to tears in hearing people who have lost everything, whose island is devastated, singing about the goodness of God. They weren't praying and begging for relief. They were worshiping God and thanking him for what they still had left. So Pastor Happy's just inviting people off of the streets the circle's growing. People are joining in song and worship. And then at the end we sang about 3 songs, and at the end of that, he just shares the gospel. And it's like, if you don't know this, if you don't have the hope of Christ in your hearts, now is the time to turn to God. And he essentially gives an altar call right there in the middle of this hurricane-struck area.
We love the opportunity and the ability, the grace to be able to reach out to people on the street, minister to them, share the gospel with them. After the first night here, we had devotions, and the people came from the streets to join us, and they gave their life to Jesus, during our devotion, and that was so awesome. And maybe if the storm never happened, maybe they wouldn't have joined us in devotion.
And people just start raising their hands to accept Christ, who had wandered in off the streets. So multiple people accepted Christ on that first day, not because of work we were doing, but just because of seeing the worship of people who had lost everything, but were still saying, "We trust you, God."
Wow. That is incredible. And that's why, I feel like, yes, you go to serve and help, but the church ends up serving you and by their obedience. And I always say, I don't know if I would be that way, if I lost everything. But I think as believers, we always have something to be hopeful and worshipful about, no matter what our circumstances are like. And we can always look back at what he's done, how he's delivered us, look to the cross, the gospel. So introduce me to some of the people that you met. You told us about the pastor in the church, but tell me about the people that were helping. How did you see the physical touch points get to their heart?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that stuck out to me across a lot of different families and beneficiaries that I met is that when you would say, "How are you doing? How are you holding up?" so many of them would say, "Praise God, I have life. Thank God for life." So we're hearing this over and over again and not really fully understanding what they mean other than just the surface level. And then on maybe the second or third day, someone came up to me who was a local there and said, "You realize that when they say thank God for life, they're saying that's all I have left." So that just impacted our team greatly in how they were still focusing on the little that they had rather than how much they had lost in the storm. So that, I think, just shows the resilience and the heart of the people there, that they were able to say, what's the good in this? What's the good in this really horrible situation? One lady that we met, her name was Princess, and she sheltered 41 people in her house during the hurricane. Wow. And she's pointing around like, "Oh yeah, that family in the White House, they came to me. The person in the yellow house, they stayed with us." And she had a pretty large home where the bottom was a concrete structure. So she sheltered 41 people to wait out the storm. I met other people who, were inside their home as the outside walls crumbled, the roof blew off, and they're just hunkered down trying to wait out the storm. So there was a lot of just fear from the storm left over. People had lost everything, but they were so grateful. And I think when you're in such a devastated area and you're bringing solar lights and tarp, it can feel like, goodness, they just need so much more. This is such a simple item to give them when they've lost everything. So I would ask some of them, like, how is this going to help you? Do you think this will help make a difference? And one lady told me, she was just like, when you have nothing left but a few things, anything that you can salvage and save from the storm becomes so important. And she's like, this tarp gives me hope because I can protect the little that I have left. She talked about losing most of her clothes, which she was very upset about. And she said, if you've bought a dress and you've used your hard-earned money to buy a dress, then if you can just save that dress, that gives you courage to keep going. So just being able to tarp a portion of her home and protect little that she had left was going to be such a relief to her. There's no electricity on the island. There's no running water on the island. So the solar light was a huge relief. They were so excited to have something to light their homes by at night. It actually gets dark pretty early there, maybe around 6 or 6:30.
Oh, wow.
You can also charge your phone off of the light source, which a lot of people really needed to be able to contact their family and stay in touch with people. So just those simple items were giving people a little bit of relief and a little bit of hope that, things were going to get better.
Are there ways that you saw God answer prayer while you were there?
It really felt like every little step was just an answer to prayer. Being able to get our supplies over on the barge so quickly, being able to work out those logistics. Our team did an amazing job in partnership with the local church of figuring all of that out. I think we mobilized maybe the fastest that I've ever seen it in terms of the plane was being loaded in Greensboro before the hurricane was even done hitting the islands. We landed, took the supplies in by barge, and as soon as we woke up the next morning, we were cutting tarp and getting distributions out. So there was no lag time. It was just step by step, we got to get these things out. And I think that was just an answer to prayer of speed matters after a disaster and how the Lord really opened the doors to be able to do that so quickly.
These are such incredible stories in the midst of such devastation. And I'm grateful that there are people like Pastor Happy that are sharing the gospel and choosing to see the goodness of God in the darkest of times. This truly convicts me. Because of Samaritan's Purse, incredible network of churches through Operation Christmas Child, we were able to quickly deploy a team to help those who call these island nations home. And it's clear that God was preparing Devon, one of the Operation Christmas Child international field representatives, who was also a former shoebox recipient himself. He was preparing him years before the hurricane hit for such a time as this. David Thompson, the Senior Director of Operation Christmas Child International, told me how this area of ministry has been involved in the hurricane response.
Devon's actually from Grenada, and so he was incredibly helpful with both flight permissions, logistics, government relations, and we were able to send the first DC-8 flight down there very quickly after the hurricane's impact. And I was told by our DART IMIT team that Devon did a fantastic job organizing volunteers from churches to unload and do distributions in northern Grenada. When you see that aircraft come in and you know what's on there and you know the love, the intentionality, the favor that God gives for us to be able to have the resources to respond when there's no one else there. We have the access, we have the equipment, and then to know that we have a landing base in the local church. That's this network that the Lord's raised up for the last couple decades. It's just such a blessing. I mean, these local churches were out there with Devon. He's a former senator in Grenada, and he's a local church pastor, and he's incredible. He got a box. That's how his ministry impact started with Operation Christmas Child. He still has that box. It's an incredible box. Someone made it out of this elaborate material, and he got that like 35 years ago.
This is what I love. Like, God prepares in advance And that's why Ephesians 2:10 is my favorite verse. God, you are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God has it planned in advance for you to do. And I think, so so let's dig into that for just a minute. Devon got a shoebox.
When he was a kid, and was, I think, the youngest senator in the history of Grenada, and then felt the call to join the OCC ministry. And so now he gets this opportunity to bless his nation, not just with the incredible gospel opportunities or the volunteer network, but to tie that volunteer network on the tarmac in with the response that's happening from Samaritan's Purse. That's a God thing. That's a God room.
It's often like this, a full circle. Operation Christmas Child opens the doors to church partners for disaster relief to come in. And then Operation Christmas Child can come back in with shoeboxes for children who've been traumatized by the disaster. David Thompson shared more about what this looks like.
So in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, the gift box isn't the right resource, but a couple months later, it does become a precious way to, after the emergency field hospital and things that are just so desperately needed right away, meet that critical need. There's a despondency that can happen kind of after all the action and impact is gone away. And I think that's a great time for the local church to step up and step in and come back around with hope in the form of a gift and getting the kids plugged into the greatest journey in the local church. Because that's ultimately the one thing that's going to be sustainable and going to be around, right, is the local church.
I love how much overlap and connectivity there is among our departments at Samaritan's Purse. We're truly stronger when we work together. And we know that there are so many different vehicles and ways to share the gospel, but the Lord is who works it all together for his glory. And North America Ministries is already responding with 6 other responses right now throughout the United States. And now that Hurricane Beryl has made landfall in Texas, they're ready to respond again. Luther Harrison, the vice president of North America Ministries, talked to me about how they've been monitoring the storm from the beginning.
Well, we started getting involved when we saw it in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. When it spooled up to a Category 5, in the 28 years I've been here, I've never seen a Category 5 in June. My alarms don't usually go off till the end of August, when the storms get more fierce. But the weather forecasters have shown us the water temperatures are warmer than ever before. So Beryl went straight into Mexico and then up into the Gulf. Mm-hmm. So it's now looks like what Harvey did coming on shore. And Beryl, thank goodness we've been to Texas, 38 different storms that we responded. And when I say thank goodness, it's like every time we go to a storm, we partner with the church. Mm-hmm. And these churches along that path, they already know us. They've already reached out to us. They're telling us what they're seeing as the damage. And, the Weather Channel and all, they're reporting how many people are without power. And now you've got this super heat coming in on them. That's hard on the elderly and families that have special needs. But now, how do we go? The Lord's got to direct our path to where we need to be. Thank God for the volunteers that continue to come out and be the hands and feet. We want to make sure that everyone hears the gospel message and understands what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross, and that we want to have that same opportunity to share that gospel message with them.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. If we can't share that, we won't go. And that's why we go. And even in devotions today, Psalm 77, I love that, how we are called to look back at what God's done so that we can go forward. And you just mentioned there's been many storms like this where it hit internationally, it came here. How have you seen, or how do you pull into what God's done in the past in order to propel you forward?
Well, I think one of the greatest things I see is, I call it our full circle volunteers. Mm. They've been a victim where they survived the storm, and we went and helped them, and now they pay it forward. They come out and are helping others, and you see them put their arm around a homeowner that just lost everything and tell them, hey, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, I know what you're going through, and there is hope. Mm-hmm. And I mean, whether it's the fires in New Mexico we're on right now where everything burnt, or your home has been flooded out, or the wind has blown it apart through the tornadoes and hurricanes, it's how do you give them that hope and reassurance? This is a temporary life we're in. As we pray for the storm victims, pray that God would show them clearly what the path is to recovery. Psalm 121:1, I look up to the heaven, and where does my help, or to the mountains, and where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And ask God to show these people clearly. And that's using the local churches to get outside the walls and go see who their neighbors were. If people are listening to this, our machines, our tools, our equipment, they're not self-propelled. We need people that are willing to come and be the hands and feet. And you may say, I don't have skill. Wait and see how God can use you. So go to the SamaritansPurse.org website, and you can see all the locations we're serving at now and where you can get involved.
Thank you so much for listening today. Please be praying for the people of Grenada, but also in Texas, and that everyone that's been impacted by this storm. The people, as we're hearing, they're really resilient, but they have a long journey of recovery ahead. Pray for our staff and our team members and our church partners on the ground, that they would truly be God's hands and feet in this storm. I love Psalm 143:8. It says, "Let me experience your faithful love in the morning, for I trust in you. Reveal to me the way I should go, because I appeal to you." Be praying for wisdom and discernment for our teams on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us today. God bless you.